All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle, and then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the two things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. Let's see, I can tell you, I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell.
Trump has just made a fool of himself on the world stage. At the United Nations in New York, two very different images of leadership have emerged. On one side, President Donald Trump turned his address to the world into a spectacle that blended personal grievances with campaign slogans. He spoke about broken teleprompters, escalators that stalled, and his belief that he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. The moment that should have showcased American vision became a reminder of how unpredictable and unfocused the White House has become. On the other side, Prime Minister Mark Carney used his own stage in New York to underline Canada's role in global trade and cooperation. He framed his country as a partner ready to fill the vacuum when others retreat. The contrast is sharp, and it tells us something important about where economic and political credibility now lies. Trump's remarks at the UN were not a roadmap for foreign policy. They were a repeat of familiar domestic talking points. He warned that countries were going to hell. He dismissed clean energy as a scam, and he exaggerated his own achievements. The substance that leaders expect from the American president was missing. Instead of building support for U.S. initiatives, he gave the impression of a leader caught in grievance politics. Behind the theatrics sits a deeper reality. Trump's reciprocal tariffs, rolled out earlier this year, were sold as a tool to reset global trade. Yet their effect has been mixed at best. The U.S. International Trade Commission noted in a September update that sectors like autos and metals have faced supply chain disruptions, while consumer groups warn of rising costs in key imports. Rather than projecting economic strength, the president's speech highlighted the gap between his promises and the economic evidence. Beyond trade, the credibility gap is widening. Federal Reserve surveys released this fall show that small manufacturers report lower new orders compared to 2024, citing tariff-driven price hikes as a major reason. Supply chains that once flowed through Japan and Korea are now stalling because negotiations remain unresolved. These are not abstract numbers. They mean delayed shipments, higher costs for U.S. consumers, and fewer investment commitments in American factories. Trump promised that tariffs would unlock a wave of new jobs and capital, but the evidence from official agencies shows strain instead of revival. While Trump wandered through tangents at the UN, Carney was busy shaping a different narrative in New York.
We have the resources the world needs. We have the talent to turn that potential into growth. We're a reliable partner.
Speaking at policy forums, he emphasized that Canada has the resources, the technology, and the alliances to thrive even in a fractured trading system. He pointed to agreements with Mexico and talks with the European Union as steps to secure markets beyond the U.S. His tone was not dramatic but deliberate. He tied Canada's energy output, critical minerals, and investment potential into a strategy meant to reassure both investors and allies. Where Trump leaned on anecdotes about construction contracts and campaign slogans, Carney leaned on the fundamentals of economic credibility. This divergence matters. In a moment when global markets look for signals, one leader projected confusion while the other projected stability. The United Nations stage has long been where American presidents outline their vision for the world. This year, the stage revealed something else. Trump's reliance on theatrics, personal stories, and exaggerated claims has turned a serious platform into an echo of domestic rallies. Instead of reinforcing the case for his tariff strategy, his words exposed its weakness. They showed a leader searching for validation while allies and rivals alike questioned the direction of U.S. policy. Carney, by contrast, used the same setting to advance a coherent message about trade and partnership. His approach did not make headlines for odd tangents or technical mishaps. It made headlines because it was steady and forward-looking. For Canadians, it was a chance to show that they can carry responsibility on the global stage. For Americans, it was a reminder that when theater replaces strategy, credibility is the first casualty.
Well, ahead of renegotiating the existing North American Free Trade Agreement, Canada and Mexico have signed a pact aimed at deepening economic ties.
We will scale up our engagement in foreign affairs, in trade and investment, in agriculture, natural resources, in energy, finance, health, the environment, and public safety and security.
When President Trump announced his program of reciprocal tariffs in 2025, the goal was clear. Ottawa was supposed to bend under the weight of higher duties on steel, aluminum, and even copper. The United States believed Canada would be left isolated, with no choice but to make concessions. Yet, something different has unfolded. Instead of isolation, Canada has been pushed to seek allies, and the most visible outcome came during Prime Minister Mark Carney's whirlwind 36-hour trip to Mexico City. There, Canada and Mexico signed a strategic partnership agreement. The trip was short, but the message was long-lasting. Trump's attempt to corner Canada is instead motivating new continental bonds.
Billed as a comprehensive strategic partnership, it includes a plan to build infrastructure like ports, rail, and energy corridors. They'll also work closer on tackling organized crime and protecting the environment.
Mexico now looks more important to Canada than it has in decades. Under President Claudia Sheinbaum, Mexico is pursuing domestic reforms and seeking partners beyond Washington. That opens a door for Ottawa. Agriculture is a prime example. Canadian canola producers have struggled with tariffs and a loss of Chinese demand. Mexico's growing biofuel sector gives them a chance to regain markets. The deal also touches energy and infrastructure, with both governments pledging cooperation on ports, rail lines, and energy corridors. For Canada, this means a way to move resources more efficiently, something that has long been a weakness in trade negotiations. For Mexico, it means more investment and reliable access to Canadian goods. Analysts also point out that this partnership signals a wider shift in North America, where smaller nations are forced to adapt quickly or risk falling behind in Trump's high-pressure trade environment. What Trump once used as a wedge to split Ottawa and Mexico City has now created common ground. At the heart of this renewed alliance lies a shared concern. Both governments know that Trump views the North American Trade Pact with suspicion. As the review of SUSMA approaches in 2026, the risk of dismantling the deal is real. Canada has already launched public consultations with businesses, open from September 20 to November 3, 2025, to gather feedback on vulnerabilities and priorities. Mexico began a similar process on September 17. The timing is deliberate. Both countries are preparing for unpredictable negotiations, and the fear is that Washington could use tariffs as leverage again. Trump's record shows he is willing to threaten withdrawal or impose new barriers if it suits his domestic agenda. That is why Carney and Sheinbaum framed their new pact as complementary to CUSMA, careful not to present it as a bloc against the United States. The words are diplomatic, but the intent is clear. Both Canada and Mexico want insurance in case the United States turns its back on the agreement. Carney's government understands that leverage in 2026 will not come from speeches but from results. For years, Canada has struggled to move its oil, gas, and minerals to market, weakening its hand. Building a working partnership with Mexico addresses that gap. It creates a sense that Canada can stand on more than one leg in the North American economy. For Trump, this is the irony. The very tariffs meant to weaken Ottawa are strengthening its resolve and broadening its partnerships. Canada and Mexico are now positioning themselves to present a more united and prepared front when negotiations open next year. Instead of breaking Canada's confidence, U.S. policy has forced Ottawa to act with urgency and build alliances that had been neglected since the early days of NAFTA. The story today is not of a country retreating under pressure, but of one seeking new ground. What was intended as economic punishment is reshaping the trade map of North America. Canada and Mexico stand side by side, and the result shows that Trump's tariffs have backfired in ways Washington never anticipated.
Tariffs on canola came up unexpectedly. If they can come on fast, then come off fast. And the Chinese are just going to want something in return.
This is something that the Prime Minister has been looking at. That being said, when it comes to EVs, you saw what we announced. First and foremost, we said that we would be lifting the ZAV mandate.
Just a few days ago, President Donald Trump renewed his call for allies to stand with the United States and punish China with higher tariffs. In his vision, Canada should act like a loyal soldier, following Washington's lead no matter the cost. Ottawa did not answer directly. Instead, it sent a very different signal. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government is now considering rolling back the 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, a tariff that was originally designed to keep pace with Washington. This move looks like a bucket of cold water thrown straight into Trump's face. While he praises America first and expects others to fall in line, Canada is showing that it is ready to step out of America's shadow to defend its own economy. The shift is not accidental. It comes after China retaliated with tariffs that crushed Canada's canola industry, a backbone of prairie agriculture. Farmers in Saskatchewan, the heartland of canola, are being squeezed. On one side, Ottawa's tariff wall on Chinese EVs. On the other, Beijing's 76% duty on canola imports imposed in mid-August. For farmers, this is not abstract geopolitics. It is a simple question of survival. Can they sell their harvest without losing money? When Premier Scott Moe returned from his mission to China with a message of more constructive talks than expected, it confirmed the pressure on Ottawa to shift course.
The EV tariff was first introduced to shield Canada's auto sector and align with Washington's strategy against Beijing. But the cost has been severe. Beijing struck back by targeting canola, one of Canada's most valuable farm exports. With duties near 76%, farmers now face the prospect of selling their harvest below production cost. Scott Moe's trip to Beijing provided a rare opening. He met directly with the officials who imposed the tariffs and described the discussions as unexpectedly positive. When he returned, Carney publicly thanked him, a gesture that showed Ottawa now sees the crisis for prairie farmers as urgent as protecting auto workers. Canada is stuck in a trade-off that pits crops against cars, and the balance can no longer hold.
In Ottawa, the tone is clearly shifting. Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly has acknowledged the government is reviewing the EV tariff and exploring new imports from Japan, South Korea, and Europe. That is a clear departure from the firm stance of earlier months. On the Chinese side, the revival of the Joint Economic Trade Commission after 7 years shows Beijing is willing to re-engage. Premier Moe reported the Chinese officials expressed a readiness to look forward rather than back. These developments suggest the two sides are testing ways to recalibrate their trade relationship, not only on canola, but in a broader framework.
If Canada removes the EV tariff, the immediate effect would be relief for farmers. China could ease its duties, restoring access to a premium market that Canadian producers rely on. Consumers would benefit from cheaper electric vehicles, though domestic manufacturers would face new competition. Ottawa could also seize the chance to demand that Chinese automakers build plants in Canada, creating jobs and strengthening supply chains. The political dimension is equally important. On the surface, this looks like a direct snub to Trump, who has urged Ottawa to join his tariff wall against Beijing. But in practice, it is more about pragmatism than open defiance. Canada cannot afford to sacrifice its farm economy simply to stay in Washington's good books, especially when Trump's own tariffs continue to hit Canadian metals, lumber, and energy exports. By recalibrating, Canada is signaling that it will defend its own workers and industries first. It is not abandoning the United States, but it is refusing to blindly follow.
In today's fractured global economy, such independence may be the only way for Canada to navigate between two superpowers without losing its footing at home.